Let's talk about this bank rescue and the state of the banking system with my guests. Joining me now, Strategic Wealth Partners President and CEO Mark Tepper and Forbes contributing writer Richard Fowler. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here, or at least I should say being there. Mark, let me start with you. The government says this was absolutely essential to save the depositors of SVB to stop a run on the whole banking system. Do you buy that?
You know, you mentioned this in your intro, and when you look at the depositors that had their money with Silicon Valley Bank, only 2.7% of the deposits were retail investors under the FDIC limit of 250 grand. So, you know, that means 97% of the depositors were either ultra high net worth individuals or these woke, profitless tech companies based out of California. With regards to them having to step in and save it, you know, I'm scratching my head. I'm sitting here wondering if they would have saved the Bank of East Palestine in Ohio. And my guess is probably not. I don't think that's really an important objective for this administration. But when you kind of look at, you know, just everything with regards to this entire meltdown, everything that happened at Silicon Valley Bank was incredibly greed-oriented, incredibly, you know, we're talking about a substantial moral hazard. I loved your intro. The one thing I want to add to this whole situation is that Silicon Valley Bank was actually hedging their interest rate risk back in 2021, Jerry. They had $10 billion of interest rate swaps on the balance sheet. Come December of 2022, they took that all the way down to almost zero. So they knowingly removed their interest rate hedges and put their own bank in jeopardy. So look, to answer your question, I do not think we should be bailing, we should not be bailing any bank out.
Richard, why on earth were these people deemed worthy of being bailed out?
Well, I think the fact pattern matters here, right? And when you think about what happened in Silicon Valley Bank, remember, the run on this bank, the run on deposits here happened within 48 hours. The last bank failure that we had took a couple weeks to happen. And that had everything to do with the fact that people were calling each other. There was literally people on Twitter saying, if you have money in this bank, go get it. And as a result of that, because the run on deposits and withdrawals happened so quickly, that is why I think the federal government stepped in here. We could question whether or not it was a right or a wrong decision, but to sit here and to point to whether or not the bank's political ideology, or whether or not, and I'm going to use air quotes here, the bank was woke as the reason to why it failed, I think that's an ideology looking for a fact pattern. What we really have to look to is the fact that this bank was a bank that specifically focused on a unique set of clients. They did not diversify their balance sheet. Their balance sheet was messy to begin with, and you just sort of lay that out very clearly there. And I think that is the larger problem with Silicon Valley Bank versus how they particularly make their investments.
Mark, very, very quickly, we've seen other problems at banks this week. First Republic getting a kind of a strange creative bailout with big banks depositing $30 billion with it. We saw the failure of Signature Bank, rumors of other banks perhaps being. How bad, very briefly, do you think this is, and how bad is it going to get?
I think it's contained. I really don't think we're going to see much contagion here. When I look at the big banks, you know, the JP Morgans, the Banks of America, companies like that, I think they're immune. They have more diversified revenue streams. They're better capitalized. The whole held-to-maturity bond situation, which really imploded Silicon Valley Bank, is not present at the other big banks. In fact, when you look at the big banks out there, they've actually been beneficiaries of this banking meltdown. As I think as of Wednesday, Bank of America had already seen $15 billion of inflows. So, look, I think it's contained. The Fed did not break SVB. SVB broke SVB.
Speaking of the Fed, Mark, let's hope Mark is right and it is contained in the banking system. But what are the broader financial problems that we've seen this week? What are the implications of that for the broader U.S. economy?